Hey guys, Dr. Nami here. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about how to balance, supplementing kids' education or homeschooling with work. As most of you guys who follow this page know, I'm a full-time board-certified plastic surgeon. My wife's a full-time cardiologist. She also heads Novant's Health Women's Heart Center. And we have two kids, currently age 6 and 4. Who, for the most part, been working with since they were probably about 16 months to 2 years of age. And just trying to figure out the right balance of how much time to spend working with them can be a little tricky. So I wanted to film this video just to give some insight, okay? First off, the way to think about this when parents often ask how much time, it's not necessarily how much time, it's how much time can you consistently give, okay? As a parent, you can spend only 5 minutes a day working with a child over the course of a year, doing it every single day, and see tremendous progress. In the same vein, you can spend 5 hours in one day trying to teach a child something, never do it again, and that child's really never going to be able to pick up that material. So when we talk about how much time a parent should spend, it really has to be a balance of time and consistency. So it's how much time can you consistently work with your child. Okay, and that really varies. That varies based on the child's age. It varies based on the child's innate temperament, based on their child's behavioral activity. So a child who's often very stimulated, when you try to get that child to sit for more than 5 minutes, is going to have a difficult time. Okay, a child who's not often in a very stimulating environment, or who prefers to be in a quieter environment, or if you see kids playing in a rough manner, if the child that kind of separates themselves and just wants to play quietly by themselves, that child's going to be able to spend a little bit more time focusing at a much earlier age. The most important thing is no matter where your child starts, with consistent practice, every child can improve their focus and increase their ability to sit and listen. Where I oftentimes get sad is when kids haven't had this exposure before starting school, and then they walk into the classroom and it's the first time they've had to actually sit down and be able to sit still and learn. So while other kids who've had that practice are in that same classroom and they're there to learn, the child who has never had any practice doing this is there to learn how to sit still. And then after a couple of months, if they master that, then they can begin the learning process. And this process can put some children at a huge disadvantage because they're in the classroom, they should be learning, but they're not learning, not due to any fault of their own, but because they haven't mastered the skill of being able to just kind of sit, focus, and learn. This is why as a parent, I think it's extremely important that every parent work with their kids at an early age. This really helps to identify kids who need a little bit of help, kids who may struggle behaviorally in a classroom setting. And that way, if you know that your child's going to need help at the age of 3, you've got at least 2 or 3 years to work on it before they actually enter the classroom. If you wait until they enter the classroom and then you find out that your child's a behavioral issue, then while other kids are already learning, your child is learning how to behave. And then once they learn how to behave, they can start the process of learning. This can really set them back. When you think about it, most kids have to learn how to read before the end of 3rd grade. That's only about 3 years. Well, 3 or 4 years if you count kindergarten, right? Now, if your child is spending half of a year or even a full year just learning how to behave before they can start the process of learning, when other kids are learning from the start, that child's going to be behind. Okay, this is why I think it's so important as a parent to you spend some time actually working with your kids. You want to know what things motivate them. You want to know what things turn them off. You want to know what subjects they're excited about, what subjects they're not excited about. This way, if a teacher calls up and says, hey, we're having a problem with your child, you can say, okay, I'm aware of this. Here's what gets him excited. Here's what turns him off. Why don't we implement this strategy and see if it works, okay? Imagine getting that same phone call or same note if you haven't worked with your child. Now you're wondering what's going on. Now you're upset at your child, even though it's not necessarily their fault that this is the first time they've had to be in this kind of environment. So now you're doing trial and error, struggling to figure out exactly what to do. By the time you finally figure it out, so much time has gone by and now your child is behind his or her peers. And worse yet, sometimes that child may be labeled as a problem child. Once a child is labeled as a problem child, in the eyes of many teachers who are handing off and telling the next teacher about your child, sometimes it's hard to really recover. And so one of the most important things you can do as a parent is start to really work with your child, even if it's just a little bit, even if for a few minutes a day. Once you do that and you get a sense for their temperament, what things they're able to do well, what things they don't like to do well, even knowing that your child can work for 10, 15 minutes, but then needs to just stretch his legs. And once they stretch their legs, they're going to get back to it. It's really helpful information to be able to pass on. When I think about my kids, when I first started, we started with short segments. I would do about 10 to 15 minute lessons with my daughter. And then after about 10 to 15 minutes, she'd get a break. That break at the time was we'd play with a toy. There was a show that I was okay with her watching. She could watch the show alongside of me. And then after the break, we would re-engage in some work. And I would do maybe 2, 10 to 15 minute sessions with a break in the middle. A lot of this was coupled with positive reinforcement, letting her know that, I just really appreciated that she's trying her best. A lot of the things that we feed kids, they take in about their own self-image. So a child who's been told that they're great from the beginning, it's going to feel great about themselves. They're going to feel smart. And when they feel smart, they're going to feel engaged. So a lot of positive reinforcement. Once we got to the point where we had a consistent routine, then I could widen the interval of time and then narrow the interval of breaks to the point where the kids could work fairly long without even needing a break. The other thing that really helps is doing the same exercises consistently over a period of time at the same time of day. My kids understand that, after we get home, they're going to eat, they're going to get a break, and then after the break, we're going to get some work done. They understand the break is really important because that break is a cue that they know identifies the period before we start working. Without that cue, they wouldn't know what to expect. The other thing that's really important is doing it at the same time of day. Because they understand that we work at the same time of day, when that time of day comes, they're expecting it. It's not like this is a surprise. This is what always happens. It's a routine for them, okay? And when it doesn't happen, they're almost thrown off. And they're like, oh, when are we going to do some work? Okay. And so by keeping the routine the consistent, same time of day, it allows kids to be able to turn into this work mode, right? Because every day during that same time, they're in that work mode rather than mixing it up where a child may be surprised and may not be ready for it. Once kids understand that this is the normal routine, then they're ready to work. I think it's so important to really be able to execute a lot of these things early, as I said before, just so that kids can have a sense of where they fall in place when it comes to sitting in a classroom setting. If you know your child has a problem, it's better to prepare that teacher, right? Put together a plan and then execute. If you know your child can focus, it's also better to advocate for your child, just to say, hey, you know what? A lot of the early work is meant, especially at the pre-K level, to just get kids to sit and focus. My child is good at that. Can we supplement with some additional material? And all of that comes with starting to know your child. Thank you guys all so much for subscribing and for tuning in. I hope this video is helpful. Feel free to tune in for more. Take care.